leaders and managers, just regular folks in companies, many of them tell me that they dread giving feedback. However, if you're in a management or leadership role, giving feedback is part of your job. And if you're not in one of those roles, feedback is a critical skill if you work with or live with other human beings. So I'm going to share how to make feedback conversations less stressful. But first I want to tell you a little story about a manager and an employee named Norma. I had met Norma, and she seemed competent and personable. So I was a little surprised when her manager told me that Norma was about to be fired. I said, well, what happened? What did Norma do? And the manager said she was spending a lot of time browsing the internet. It's just sort of puzzling because that seems like a pretty clear message and something that's, it's not a terribly difficult change to make. It's not like she had to learn a brand new skill. So I was really puzzled. And I said, well, what kind of conversations did you have with Norma? And the manager told me that she had gone up to her cube, leaned over the wall, and noticed she was watching something on the internet. And the manager said, "What you doing, Norma?" To which Norma replied with an excuse. And the manager said, "Doesn't look like that to me. Looks to me like you're browsing the internet." And that was the extent of the conversation. And Norma was about to get fired. So I'm actually not at all surprised that Norma didn't get the message. People get themselves all tied into knots over feedback. And then they do what Norma's boss did. They drop a hint, they make a vague comment, or they wait until the annual review and give the feedback then. In both cases, people and the organization suffers. The organization is losing the possibility of people doing a better job. People go on doing things the way they're doing them, thinking everything's okay, when they could actually be doing something better. And people feel blindsided. They feel like, if it was a problem, why didn't you tell me earlier in the year? And trust erodes. So why do people get so tangled up about feedback? I think the biggest reason is that people are afraid of what might happen. They're afraid that someone's going to get angry, that someone's going to cry, that they'll damage a relationship. So they wait, or they drop hints, making it less likely that the issue will be resolved, and making it far more likely that when the conversation does happen, someone's going to get angry, someone's going to cry, and you're going to damage the relationship. So let's talk about what feedback is. I think of feedback as information. It's information about a past interaction, a past result, a past event, hopefully the recent past, that's being given in the present with the hope of influencing something in the future. It's not an evaluation, it's not judgment, it's not criticism, it's not a gap analysis. It's information that someone can use to do their job better and to improve relationships. Now, this process won't guarantee a perfect outcome, but it will dramatically increase the chances of having an open conversation and having issues resolved. So the first thing to do is to start with yourself. People think that feedback is about the other person, which may be true, but it is also always about you. So that's where you need to start. Start with you. Get clear with yourself about what you want to have happen. Do you want to strengthen working relationships? Have better team dynamics? Give someone some information that will help them do their job better or assist them in their career? Check your assumptions. Did you assume that they had everything they needed to do the job? Did you assume that everybody knows how to do something that you know how to do? Get curious. Do you have a complete picture of the circumstances? Behavior is a function of the person and the environment. So the environment could have a dramatic effect on how someone's doing their job. So make sure you have a a broad picture of what's going on. How might you have contributed? If you were delegating something, were you clear about outcomes? Were you clear about the boundary conditions? What's your part in it? Think about whose problem it is. Sometimes it's not the other person's problem. It's not the organization's problem. It's your problem. For example, I don't like the way my husband loads the dishwasher. And you know what? That's my problem. There are at least 250 ways to load the dishwasher, and as long as the dishes get clean and don't break, it does not matter. So it's my problem, and I don't give him feedback on it. People often assume that their view of someone is the truth about that person, but really it's just one perspective. So get clear on where you're coming from, be open to new information, and consider it all in a shared context. Now, check your data. What have you seen and heard? You want direct, observable, specific facts. Our brains are great at pattern matching and interpreting. So make sure that you haven't fallen into reporting on an interpretation and that you're really clear about what actually happened. It's possible when you look at the data that there are multiple ways to interpret it. So consider there might be a different way to view the situation. So now that you've looked at the data, look at the impact. How is this behavior or this result or this interaction affecting you, affecting team members, affecting the organization, affecting someone's career? What impact is it actually having? If there isn't an impact, then maybe you don't need to give feedback. Now that you've looked at yourself and you've looked at the data, it's time to start writing down and thinking about what you want to say. I think it's super useful to use this 4-step process. 1, start with an opening. You need to have at least a tiny little psychological contract, a little bit of permission to offer feedback. It doesn't have to be a big opening. It can be, hey, do you have some time to talk about the meeting we were both in this morning? Or it might be, I have some information that I think would be helpful. Then make sure that it's a good time to have the conversation. So you can say, is now a good time? Should we make an appointment in the next couple days? Most people will agree to making an appointment if it's not a good time. And of course, if they won't, that's a different problem. But most people will agree. And it's really important that both of you be in a situation where you can actually listen to each other and focus. So you don't want to offer feedback when someone is rushing to catch the bus or has a toddler who is crying in the next room or is under some incredible pressure to get some work done. You need to find a time when someone can actually focus. Most things can be put off for a day or two. If it's safety critical or it's a legal or ethical matter, that's a different question, but most feedback can wait until both of you can focus and be present for the conversation. 2, describe the events you have observed or the situation or the results you've observed, the interaction you've observed, using the most neutral language you can muster. So no labels, no judgments. Be as neutral as you possibly can. So rather than saying your report was sloppy, say there were 47 typos on the first page. Just the facts. Because if you come up with a judgment, people are likely to get defensive, and that's not what you want. Avoid words like always and never, because people will come up with a counterexample, and then you've got an argument rather than a feedback conversation. Stay away from undefinable terms such as appropriate or professional, because then you'll be arguing about what the term means. 3, state the impact. This is one of the reasons you want to avoid appropriate or unprofessional words like that. because it's hard to say what the impact of either of them is. You need to be able to articulate the impact in a way that someone can see their behavior or their work habits or whatever it is actually having an effect on other people and on the results. Again, be as specific as you can and as neutral as you can. 4, make a request or a suggestion. The request may be for problem solving, it may be for brainstorming, it may be for negotiating a third way. You may have a suggestion that you want someone to try, and rarely you have a specific request. This is much more likely if you're in a management role where you have a specific reason to make a specific request, like Norma's boss did, but didn't. So now that you have this all written down, apply the trunk test. Is it true? You have observable data. This isn't conjecture or interpretation. Is it useful? Will the person be able to act on this information, and will it actually lead to some better outcome? Is it necessary? If you don't say this, will it have any impact on the work or relationships? If your feedback doesn't have any impact, then I wonder why you're doing it. Is it kind? Some people advocate brutal honesty or radical candor, but I find that people are much more likely to respond with openness and a willingness to make some changes if they're approached in a fashion that indicates that you actually care about the relationship and care about the person. And it's entirely possible to be both kind and direct. So you've got it written down and you've passed the trunk test. Now practice saying it out loud. Because writing something is different than speaking something. And you want to be able to talk about it in a way that is neutral and fits your style. So one guy I was talking to said, "Oh, this sounds so formal, I could never do that." And so I said, "Well, how would you tell someone that something was going on?" So he said, "Well, I had to talk to someone just the other day, my cube mate. I talked to him and I said, 'Say, when you play your music so loud I can hear it through your headphones, I can't think. Would you cut it out?'" Guess what? All 4 parts were in there. But they were said in his voice and in a way that was consistent with the relationship that he had. So practice saying it out loud and reword it until it sounds like you. This framework isn't a script. It's a tool to help you prepare. It's so that you can be calm, you can be clear on your message. You won't get nervous and wrap things up in so much cotton candy or cotton wool that the other person will never really quite know what you're getting at. So be prepared, and be prepared to adjust to the moment and what's going on in front of you. I'll talk about how to handle the actual conversation in another video. If you found this valuable, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and please check out the links in the description for other articles about offering feedback.